Thank you again, Christine, for making the time to speak with us about this very impactful and very important issue in terms of which demonstrates gender inequality within this global pandemic. So can you please describe what the issue is and what you have done to help to find solutions to this challenge and what your ideal solution would be?
Sure. So some of my discussion will be more specific to the academic context, but I think there's some broader observations that we can make that also map into academia, but also into, say, the professional world, the corporate world. And one starting point might be to say that we know that women with children, research has supported this, that women with children spend significantly more time on caregiving and also more time on housework than their male counterparts. And this is true in the corporate world, in the professional world, it's true in academia, and interestingly, it's also true for dual career academic couples, where both the husband and wife are academics, that women still bear a higher burden in terms of those kinds of activities. And the problem is that once COVID started, we, observed, it was easy to observe that the things that were happening were going to hit some people harder than others. And so this is one example, but I think it is one of the biggest examples, which is that because there were school closures, and even now where schools are open, some families are choosing to homeschool because of concerns about health, because childcare may not be as accessible as before. For example, when grandparents would help, we knew that this would be, have a huge impact on those people working who had children, young children at home. And interestingly, again, so that coming from a broader context, there was a McKinsey and Company report. So they study women in the workplace. This is their 6th year of doing this survey. And they said that this year really stood out for them for exacerbating gender gap issues. And one of the things that they noted is that departure rates, normally kind of the same proportion of men and women contemplated leaving the workforce or reducing their hours, but this year they saw a huge increase, like a more significant increase from women than men. Twice as many women were thinking about reducing their working hours. 4 times as many women were thinking about moving to part-time. And about twice as many women than men were thinking of leaving the workforce altogether. So, and this is a big problem. This is, what's often referred to as the pipeline problem, because you want to have representation of women at higher ranks, that is at higher managerial ranks, at the executive level, at board level. And so you always need to have a good pipeline of women earlier on in their career that can then be, mentored and work their way into those leadership positions. So if you start losing women in the earlier stages, and this is true in academia but also in the corporate world, then it has implications not just for now but for longer term. So this could be a really significant problem going forward. And what the people were saying, but particularly women, about why this was happening is that one of the big issues was the higher housework and caregiving responsibilities. They felt they had not a lot of flexibility. They feel like they're always on, so like there's never any downtime for them. And they also feel judged for their caregiving, so they might be very sensitive to if a child runs into the room during a meeting and if someone makes a comment about it, they're very sensitive to the concern that their performance will be evaluated negatively, even if that interruption has nothing to do with their performance. So it's so that transition to working at home and having these increased responsibilities has had a really negative impact. Now, more specifically to academe, what first caught my attention was the deputy editor of the British Journal of Philosophy of Science. Her name is Elizabeth Hannon. She tweeted early on during COVID, negligible number of submissions to the journal from women in the last month. Never seen anything like it. And so this sparked this broader conversation about whether COVID was negatively hurting women, particularly their ability to research, because research takes, concentrated time. And the concern was that these conditions surrounding COVID would negatively impact their ability to have the time. Also, there were concerns maybe about increased service demands. Certainly, there's increased teaching demands, as I've observed myself, because many of us have had to, in very short order, transition to an online format, something we've never done before. So her quote sort of sparked a bunch of research, and the research continues to come out, but it appears that in journals, including those in political science, economics, medicine, and international studies, the results seem to be holding up, that there seem to be fewer papers coming out by women, fewer in the medical area where order matters. There's a lower share of women who are first authors than there normally is. And they've also, so that's looking at submissions of papers. They've looked at published papers. They've looked at a distribution of earlier stage papers, and it does seem to hold across sort of different measures. So definitely some evidence growing that COVID is hurting women and their ability to publish. And two big concerns about that. One is that it tends to be impacting the earlier stage women, so those who are more likely to have school-age children at home. And then these are going to be women that are pre-tenure, so then this calls into question how this is going to impact their tenure. And I'd say the parallel in the corporate world is this could impact women and their ability to be promoted, and more broadly, just the ability to retain women, have them stay full-time, not going part-time or not leaving completely. So that's what I would describe, Patty, as the problem that I see. And I can then talk a little bit about what Ranjini and I did to try to think about that issue here at Waterloo. We were concerned about how this was going to impact women through two mechanisms, one being performance evaluation and the other one, which is an annual process, and the other one being the promotion and tenure process. And so we did request to speak to the equity committee of the faculty association, and they were very supportive to talk to us. We did make, we had an interesting discussion, and we did make some recommendations to them. One thing that occurred to me prior to that meeting was the realization that women, particularly pre-tenure women, may be very hesitant to bring to the attention of the administration the fact that they have been negatively and possibly disproportionately affected by COVID, because they don't want to be judged as not caring about their work, not being serious-minded. And so this exacerbates the issue because women are afraid to advocate for themselves, which is such a shame. And you would hope that they would have support from their departments, but every department is different and every department has different views. So one thing that we recommended, and I'm really happy to see that it happened, was that any guidance come at the university level. so this not be something that would be brought out sort of department by department. So the guidelines are pretty clear, and they've come out at the university level. So hopefully that means that they'll be applied consistently, which is very positive. We spoke mostly about performance evaluation and not so much about promotion and tenure, but a few kind of the main thing that we were arguing for, and I think it would be helpful also in a corporate context, was that we argued that there should be options provided to faculty for performance evaluation for this year. And specifically that they could choose whether or not to be evaluated. And what has come out by the university, which I was really happy to see, is that they've done it even more granularly, where they said, there's 3 aspects of faculty performance: service, teaching, and research. And what they are allowing faculty to do, and this is all faculty, not just women and not just pre-tenure faculty and not just faculty with children, but everybody, that you can choose to be evaluated in all 3 areas, or you could choose to only be evaluated in 1 or 2 of the 3 areas. So you don't have to be evaluated in all 3 areas. And if you choose not to be evaluated, I believe they will assign you the departmental average for your performance evaluation instead. And another option they're providing is that you can choose not to use the teaching evaluations in the assessment of your teaching performance. And that's really helpful because everyone had to pivot very quickly to delivering their courses online. And, we don't have a lot of experience with this, so we're all reinventing the wheel. We're all learning. And I heard from a colleague, a well-respected colleague who's a very good teacher who taught in the spring term, who said they got the lowest evaluations they've ever gotten in their career in that term because students were just upset about a lot of things. So you could still choose to be evaluated for teaching, but could ask not to have your evaluations used as part of the assessment. So I think that's actually really, really useful. So it's not a perfect method evaluating. And ideally, if in a perfect world, you'd like to say, okay, tell me how you've been impacted by COVID, and we'll take that into account. And then it would be done, it would be taken into account in an unbiased way. But it's probably impossible to do that. So I think at least giving faculty a lot of options in terms of how they approach evaluation is very useful. And there will be presumably faculty who don't feel like they were impacted, maybe even impacted positively because they could work at home more, maybe they could get more research done, maybe they have no children, they have, maybe they commuted before, they don't have to commute now. It could have been helpful to some people, but our concern is more for those who have been negatively impacted, and in particular those where we think the biggest impact is, which is those with small children at home or major caregiving responsibilities. So that's what I wanted to say about performance evaluation, Patty. I can also say a little bit about tenure and promotion as well.
Yes, please. Just because this is a sensitive issue, and I think for our faculty members, and I'm very thankful that you brought it to a broader scope that includes corporate as well as staff within the university, and just how COVID has impacted, pretty much obviously impacted everyone in all industries and all roles and responsibilities. But certainly for our faculty members and especially the pre-tenure, the young faculty members, tenure and promotion is what they work towards. And COVID has certainly thrown a huge wrench in for women who are aspiring to reach tenure within the next couple of years. And this has probably put a huge stall to their plans.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and that's a huge consideration because in accounting, I did a study that got published maybe a year ago, I was looking at accounting faculty, and whereas almost 50% of incoming accounting profs in Canada are female, only 22% of tenured full professors are female. So we definitely lose women in the process of promotion. And I think that's a big concern. So, and this could be something I will, definitely negatively impact women and may exacerbate this issue. And so, again, options are positive for tenure and promotion. And the university did very early on. So this was with, before we met with the equity committee, they came out with a statement that pre-tenure faculty could elect to take an additional year on their clock towards promotion and tenure. And that's very valuable, because if this year is to a large extent a write-off year for some pre-tenure faculty, because they're not able to get their research done, because their teaching is taking a hit, because they're making a huge transition in the way that they have to deliver courses. If they're maybe being asked to do different service things that are needed, which they normally wouldn't have to do, giving them an extra year is extremely helpful. The only negative side of this is that research has shown that universities that have broad parental leave policies actually have unintended consequences that could increase the gender gap. Because what happens is, when you have a maternal leave policy, that only helps women, and it helps them in a very positive way. So it acknowledges that when they have children, when they have babies, they need time to recover physically, they need to look after the child, they're not going to get any work done. And so that extra year helps them process all of that and then come back and sort of get back onto the treadmill of, progress towards tenure. The problem with parental leave policies, and I, of course, strongly encourage men to be involved in the raising of their children, and I know many are fantastic about doing that. Parental leave policies don't tend to ask faculty if they are the full-time caregiver of the child. And so often they result in men taking parental leave and getting a lot of research done because they're not the primary child caregiver. And so what happens is that when you offer parental leave, again, women are just sort of, they lose that year fully. Men actually are more productive. And then again, when women are evaluated for tenure, they compare unfavorably towards men. And so they actually, it hurts their chance of getting tenure. So, my only fear with this blanket policy is that by giving everyone the option, all faculty who are pre-tenure, the option of taking another year towards tenure, that it might increase the productivity of some, which is fantastic, but unfortunately will then make those who have been most impacted compare negatively to the others, and could be a negative signal when they do in fact go up for tenure. So that's something we won't see for a while, and I guess it will depend on the extent to which people who are not impacted that significantly, whether or not they take this option that they have. But tenure is a difficult hurdle, and presumably everyone can and should take advantage of the policies that are available to them. So that policy, I don't know that is going to help people, particularly women with small children who have been impacted very significantly. It's better than nothing, but the broad kind of blanket approach can have negative consequences as well. So, and again, I think these issues, faculty performance evaluation and promotion, are true in the corporate world just as much as in the academic world. And I noticed that the topic did seem to resonate with some of our presenters at the Women in Accounting and Finance event that happened a couple of weeks ago, that, some senior women expressed significant concern about losing women or increasing gaps between men and women in in the professions in the corporate world because of COVID. So they're seeing that as well. And so for them, it's also important to say, how can we modify our regular performance evaluation systems for this year and as long as COVID persists, so that women are not particularly disadvantaged? Because we know that there are systemic biases in the corporate world and in academia that make it harder for women to function and to reach leadership positions. So the fact that this is making things worse warrants attention.
If budget wasn't an issue, if policies is ultimately flexible, what do you hope for an ideal world in terms of gender equality, in terms of evaluation, and for women, both in the corporate world and in academia?
So I think one issue is making things as flexible as possible, because flexibility is a huge advantage. And that's one area where I would say in academia we already benefit compared to our corporate counterparts who probably have to be in one place at one time more often than we do. The extent to which you can give employees flexibility in terms of where they work and how they work and when they work is huge. And so, I know a lot of companies have tried to make are developing family-friendly policies. I think that just needs to continue, and especially so during COVID. So one thing could be, just offering more options during COVID than you normally might to accommodate people who are facing increased challenges, like being able to work very different hours of the day. I think the other thing is, like, the issue that Ranjini and I took forward is the performance evaluation has to be different for this year. And you have to approach it with that women are afraid. They're already afraid that they are biased against because they have children and because they have family issues, afraid to raise these issues. And we've got to take that stigma away, because in this year, it's really beyond anyone's control what has happened. So normally I would say, okay, well, as a woman, you need to have good support. You choose good schools for your children. You have good childcare for your children. All of that went away in March and has come back to varying degrees. So I think that, I'm just hoping that administrators look at this with no bias. And to the extent that performance evaluations do offer people flexibility, that, again, they don't have any bias. If, for example, I said, I don't want to be evaluated on my research this year, I shouldn't have to say why, and the university policy is that way, which is positive. But also the person evaluating me, has to accept that free of bias and can't make judgment calls as to why I'm making that choice, or why Jane Doe is making that choice, or Joe Smith is making that choice. These should be free of bias. And for promotion and tenure, I think we need to continue to think of ways to help promote women. And part of it might be in the evaluation of teaching, because research shows that there are biases against women on that count. How you take maternity into account, how you take childbearing into account. I don't have a lot of easy answers, but to the extent that organizations are sensitive to these issues and write policies with the intention of women, I think is important. And again, going back to the parental leave example, I mean, there are men who legitimately stay home and raise children, and they should be afforded the options that women are as well. But we do have to kind of take individual circumstance into account for those kinds of adjustments. And I think the other thing I would just say in general, this is not a COVID specifically, but I know this is true in academia. We often perceive academic leaders as having male agentic characteristics, as being aggressive, as being forceful. And the fact of the matter is that females can be very successful academics. And so we have to recognize that, when we're thinking about promoting people, when we're thinking about awarding, and actually here's I guess a blue sky idea, is when research awards are given to faculty, maybe that's an area where we can think about how can we enhance the ability of female researchers, particularly early stage researchers. Maybe we should have some funding that is designated for female researchers. Maybe we can offer extra research assistantships for females to help them jumpstart their careers, or when they come back from a maternity leave, again, get back into it as quickly as possible, sort of hit the ground running when they're returning. So, some proactive policies may also be really helpful in making sure that women don't fall behind in academia because of COVID.
Some fantastic solutions, and some fantastic and idealistic solutions that ultimately make sense and seem like they are realistic and attainable. It's just a matter of moving through that process and getting buy-in. I've been inspired by what you've the insights that you've provided, Christine. So thank you so much again for taking the time out of your very busy teaching and research days to speak to us and give us a little bit of insight in terms of what some of the challenges that women are facing, not just within corporate, but within the professions, but also academia. And I truly, truly do hope that the silver lining of COVID-19 is bringing to light and spotlighting these gaps and these challenges that we do have, and really collaboratively making a collective effort for positive change.